Okay, today we're joined by Nicole Moss, a powerhouse general counsel who is doing what many lawyers only dream about, guiding not just one, but several high-impact companies at the same time. Nicole is currently the in-house general counsel for Geophysical Technology, Assurance Medication Management, and BluBridge. Nicole's path has taken her from big law and into boardrooms across health tech, energy, and emerging technologies. She brings sharp legal instincts, a calm presence, and a rare ability to support fast-moving teams with big ambitions. In today's conversation, we explore what it takes to balance multiple general counsel roles, how she builds trust across industries, and why she believes legal strategy should always focus on enabling impact. Nicole, welcome to Ivory GC.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So we always start with what you're up to and what you're doing now. And I mentioned you're general counsel for a few companies, and I think do I have it right that you serve really as a fractional outside general counsel to a variety of clients?
Really close. And maybe it's a distinction without a difference. I see myself actually more as having a bunch of part-time jobs as opposed to having a fractional business. So I feel very embedded with the teams. And even though I'm not fully an employee, I'm a contractor, I think to them, they shouldn't see a difference. I'm part of the executive management. I'm in the boardroom. I'm fully privy to all the secrets. They're not calling me as an outside counsel when there's a problem. I'm proactive there, and so I play a more in-depth role, I think.
And so how long have you been serving in this capacity?
I started this at the end of 2013.
Okay, nice. And so how many clients are you working with today?
So it's a little tough to count because there's subsidiaries and affiliated companies and stuff like that, but roughly speaking, about 8 companies.
Okay, great. And can you walk us through your background a bit, how you got to where you are in your career at this point?
Sure. So I graduated law school in '95, and at that time, it was not a great hiring year, but I was very fortunate to have a job, and I went into law as a litigator, focused on insurance coverage and insurance defense. And while I think a lot of that, a lot of learning took place in insurance coverage, I was more drawn to the litigation aspect. I had done mock trial in law school until I wasn't, and I realized that actually I didn't like litigation, and there was a lot of fighting and not a lot of courtroom, which was sort of a shock to me. In law school, it's all about the moot court and the evidentiary learning and objections and things like that, and that's just not how real life was. So I ended up looking around and going, well, what else could I do? Getting a little bit discouraged and thinking maybe I shouldn't be a lawyer at all. I quit law. And after less than 5 years of practice, I quit and became a recruiter for a recruiting firm, recruiting lawyers, and got recruited to a .com incubator as a recruiter in order to develop their recruiting arm as a profit center for the .com incubator up in Boston. And so I was combining aspects of business and business planning and working with startups and helping build startup teams, recruiting to executive founding teams and board members, and absolutely loved it. And then, as you know, as everybody knows now, the party was over pretty quickly, and found myself without a job. So I took the business plan with the incubator's blessing and started my own company. I was recruiting teams for scaling startups for a couple of years there in the early 2000s. And then really the bottom dropped out of that too. So I had the opportunity to be a businesswoman and work with startups, both of which impacted my future legal career. In 2004, I decided that maybe I should go back to law. That law degree was expensive and startups don't pay a lot. So I started my legal career all over again, almost 9 years after I graduated. And fortunately for me, very fortuitously, the law firm Weil Gotshal was building a Boston office. They had made a local acquisition. They were looking for talent, and I happened to be in the right place at the right time. And that was pivotal for me. So even though they maybe were a little surprised I was willing to be a first year all over again, I didn't have corporate skills. I had litigation skills. I
Yeah.
was at a first year all over again, got all the training, started in M&A, went over to private equity. And in the 5 years I was there, I had an absolute blast. I loved it. I was used to the hard work. And then in 2009, when the bottom again dropped out of the market, I came back to Houston and started my in-house career. I was an in-house general counsel at a small fund, moved briefly through small law and right back out into what I'm doing now.
Nice. So, how did those transitions shape your long-term view of the legal profession?
I I began to see that lawyers had to, you need the training and
Yeah.
and the rigor of the training. You have to pay your dues as an early attorney and really learn your stuff. But then you can take it in so many directions. And it shaped my understanding of what a lawyer's really there to do. So as you're a baby lawyer and you're learning and you're jumping on every little nuance like a law school exam, real life is a lot more practical than that. And you have to focus on what really matters. And you can't be picking out these esoteric scenarios that you can concoct in the theory, in the theoretical. You've got to really be practical and go, is this a realistic risk? What are the actual realistic risks? And guard your downside for that. You don't have unlimited time. People will not pay you unlimited money to figure out every permutation for your contract.
So you have built a career across multiple industries and legal roles, including fund work, private equity, seismic tech, and health analytics. So what has guided your decision making when choosing the next opportunity?
Initially, it was whoever would have me, and wherever there was an early stage company willing to take a leap and go, yeah, sure, we need a lawyer on our team. What a good idea. And now I've been so fortunate to have more work than I can actually handle. Mostly now I'll take a meeting and see what people need, what early stage companies need, and then more often than not, I'm going to refer them out. And I've got wonderful attorneys on my contacts that I can match them up pretty well. But occasionally, and more often when it's somebody I've worked with before, they'll just come to me with an idea that's so compelling. I really want to be a part of it. So I get to pick and choose a little bit now.
Yeah, that's a bit of the best of both worlds. So you're
I love
currently
it.
serving as in-house general counsel in multiple companies, including GTI, Assurance, and BluBridge. What is it like managing that range of responsibilities across different business models?
It's it's a challenge. You've got
Yeah.
to have a lot of communication and organization, and with all of them a foundation of trust that says I'm not going to let you down. I'm going to deliver for you. I may not deliver in the next hour or today, but you're going to get it. You're going to get it timely. It's going to be done right. And I think that the give and take there is that the early stage companies who are a little budget constrained are very glad to have an experienced counsel on their team who can navigate the complexities. Things don't get less complex just because you're early stage, just because you have a smaller budget. They're just as complicated as bigger companies. And so they're willing to compromise with me. So if they know they need to check with me on a calendar to calendaring a meeting, and that's not a problem. It's not a big give, but we just know that we've got to be talking to each other and working together on getting to our goals.
So I've got a lot of respect for you because it's some of the being in-house relationships to me, I've found have become more important.
Mhm.
And you have to part of almost a bigger part of the job than delivering legal services is delivering to people that you know and have come to work with in a way that requires some tailoring per person and personality. And so you have to, that's it's kind of be a bit different than the role as outside counsel, where you really need to, as in-house counsel, you really need to know the people that you're working with and be able to work with not just the general counsel as your outside counsel client, but the CFO or the CEO or the COO or the CMO, whoever's in the executive suite. And so you've got to do that 8 times. And that's a bit of a challenge. As I'm sure required some versatility. What have some of the successes or lessons that you've learned through managing those relationships? How have you been able to do that effectively?
That's a great question. And it takes, I think you have to be emotionally intelligent to take a job like that and really be able to read the room and read it pretty quickly and know who your audience is, know who you're dealing with. I I relish that part of the job. I love it. I love the strategy and meeting people where they are. Some folks want the expanded version. They want to learn. They want to be an educated consumer. They don't want to practice law, but they want to understand why you're suggesting one course of action over another. And others want top line only. That's all we've got time for. It's all I want to hear about. And then if they want to dig further, they will. So understanding those nuances with individuals, and also even deeper than that, are they interested in your in your ancillary thoughts? Do they want the strategic, or do they just want the facts?
Yeah,
And it's not even the same from day to day. It's situational as well.
yeah,
So
yeah,
developing those relationships and really getting to know the individuals you're working with and what they like and how they like their information and how they consume information, and also the corporate culture. There are corporate cultures where it's really the executives talk, and there are corporate cultures where ideas can come from anywhere and it's almost more
yeah.
consensus building. So there, so much goes into it, and you have to assimilate all of that information pretty quickly.
Yeah. Looking back, has there been a pivotal moment in your career where you had to rethink your legal approach or leadership style?
Going in-house, it was a
Yeah.
transition because I was so used to being outside counsel and having the luxury of a little bit of extra time, even if we didn't bill for it, and walking down the hall and talking to the tax expert who probably wrote a book on tax, or
Yeah.
the real estate expert, and then getting into the in-house and people not wanting to spend that much time. Certainly, they don't want you to spend that kind of time, and they want you to figure everything out. You're the lawyer, you just have all things law. That's your domain, and we have zero outside budget initially for you to go ask experts anyway. So you become adept at who can I get this information from for essentially free, really quickly,
Yeah. Yeah.
and how can I foster a relationship that will get me that? And it would, how can I also be helpful to other people? It's not so mercenary as that. And so that was a big change,
Yeah.
and also realizing what bills look like from the inside. So it was one thing as an attorney in a law firm, you write your bills down and you try to make them very practical, but at the same time, it's also very routine, and it may explain in your head and to your eyes what you did for 10 and a half hours. But when somebody's actually reading that bill and they see an enormous chunk, 10 and a half hours, oh my goodness, what did you do with all that time?
Yeah.
And should you take 10 and a half hours to write a complicated document? What's really behind that? And did you go down some rabbit trails you didn't need to? So it made me look at things a little bit differently, and that was that was a learning experience. But fortunately, I was doing so with a lot of patience, and also being able to compare an in-house billing rate with an equity component to outside counsel, where you're almost always going to compare very favorably.
Yeah. Yeah. So when your clients need legal support for a skill set that maybe you are, is relatively new to you or underdeveloped compared to some of your other skill sets, will you collaborate with other subject matter experts or other outside counsel at a law firm, or will they do you just kind of stay out of that relationship between your client and their subject matter expert at another law firm? How does that work in your practice?
Sure. Well, as a fellow lawyer, you do not want to tread into waters that you do not know well. So that's the danger zone. You're not going there. And what are the other options? Sometimes it's some simple basic education, and I realize this is somewhat taboo, but getting a foundational knowledge from ChatGPT is not off the table.
Yeah.
Practical law has been a wonderful tool,
Yeah. Yeah.
and they do some great write-ups as well as having fantastic templates, and I pay for that out of pocket. It is so valuable.
Yeah.
And then yeah, talking to subject matter experts for sure. When there's budget, and sometimes I have to go in and make the case. Well, but you better find budget, because I am not going to overnight become an expert in this, and you don't have the time or the money for me to take 6 months and go learn this really, really well. So we're going to go talk to an expert. And there are some things I just absolutely stay completely out of, because it's too much of a quagmire for
Yeah.
newbies. I'd be dangerous. And tax, deep IP patents, and
Yeah.
patent protection and things like that.
Yeah.
Litigation, interestingly enough, I know enough to know we need experts.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. 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 Right.
I,
Right.
I, I have made the case and will always make the case for that. We had a very complicated potential transaction with private debt a year or so ago, and not only was it going to be a bad idea for me to try to navigate that and a 100-page debt document, but it was a no-go. It was actually going to be a requirement of the transaction that we hire outside counsel. So I had it was a lot of fun to work with sophisticated outside counsel on something that where I was really learning all about what they were doing.
Yeah.
And so I've developed some great relationships with outside counsel that I can go to periodically. And otherwise, I have friends, plenty of friends in different areas of the law who are generous with their time. I call them up and they'll just tell me, is there a there there? Because that's what I really need to know. Is this something that's going to matter and I need to hire outside counsel, in which case I will? Or is this nothing, and don't spend my wheels trying to gin up a relationship that isn't necessary?
Yeah. So you're now supporting BluBridge, a company working at the intersection of energy and emissions reduction. What are some of the legal questions or complexities that arise when advising on sustainability-focused technologies?
It is a hot area right now,
Yeah.
and we are doing some exciting things. I
Cool.
love this company. I'm so excited by their technology. Their technology cleans fuel, cleans natural gas and crude oil, either
Interesting.
at the wellhead or the refinery. I mean, it's just such a game changer. I'm really excited. I think one of the biggest pitfalls in sustainability right now is separating yourself from the hype. And because there are a lot of businesses they're great ideas, but they're maybe unproven, or they're great proven ideas, but they rely so heavily on the current administration and how it treats sustainability, and that's kind of the toggle for their profitability. And while I think there's certainly a place for that, and I think that the government funding to help us innovate sustainability is not a bad thing, when it comes down to businesses that need to ultimately stand on their own and turn a profit and establish themselves as actual going concerns, separating yourself from the from the hype, from the pack, is a challenge. And I think that's pervasive, whether you're talking about law or innovation, or the actual uh, intellectual property that you're trying to protect, and then how that translates into the kinds of representations you're able to make in your contracts to your customers.
What similarities or differences do you see between advising energy, SaaS, and healthcare companies when it comes to innovation and regulation?
So I think really no different than whether they're startups or industry specific. As startups, I think we're serving a smaller niche. We're still in the toehold phase of all of them are post revenue. A couple of them are post profit, and so we've established ourselves. We're looking for not just initial market adoption, and we've gone beyond proof of concept. We're looking for market penetration at this point. So we're able to still work in a little bit of a bubble, and in some cases fly under the regulation radar. So, for example, healthcare, on day one, patient one, you have to be fully HIPAA compliant. So there's that regulation. On the other hand, if you're looking at privacy laws, a lot of them have de minimis requirements for how many customers you serve, how big a business you are. They kind of let you get up and running. So looking at the regulatory landscape for each of these companies, assessing what applies and what will apply in the future, so you can be designing your infrastructure and your compliance to meet that someday, and assessing what you've got to do now versus what you can do down the road, drives the focus.
When advising founders or executive teams, how do you approach conversations around risk, especially when the stakes are high and the industry is evolving?
Well, risk is always in the room.
Yeah.
Risk is huge, and
Yeah.
and it's a big driver for legal. I mean, I've got sales and corporate evangelists who are out there telling us the upside and the business model and how things make money, but I'm looking at the downside. How do I approach conversations? I would say that I have to just think about it, really. Understand what we're trying to achieve. Think about
Yeah.
what the risk is and what the impact is, and what the cost is. And if it's manageable with a few disclaimers, if it's manageable by setting some caps in place, some discounts, what kind of remedies we're able to offer if things go south, and figure out the boundaries, and then communicate the boundaries in the initial modeling phase, as well as ensure that they make it into the contract.
So what tends to signal that a company is ready for a more structured legal function or general counsel role?
So, well, I come in as GC, so when I get there, and I'm pretty much always the first one.
Yeah.
So, so they're ready when they talk to me, or they're not. I mean, if they're not ready, I think that you need legal help initially, one way or another. You need legal help when you're starting a company, and maybe that's LegalZoom from the very beginning, or something like that.
Right.
I love LegalZoom. I'm a huge fan. If you're
Yep.
going to get in there, and it doesn't really matter if your documents are perfectly tailored to you, you just got to get something going so you can go prove your product or your concept. Go do that.
Yeah.
But at the time I join, usually the company has already been started. We're past proof of concept and we're into the first raise, like seed raise, and you got to have counsel for that. And then it's a decision. Do you budget for outside counsel and do it that way, or can you bring somebody on part-time who can look at your raise, who can make sure that your documents are in order, so you'll survive a due diligence inquiry, which even at seed stage you're going to get those questions, and are you mitigating your risk so that you don't get caught out by something stupid? You didn't
Hmm.
form your entity properly, or you're not filing your reports, you're out of compliance, you've gotten a corporate veil. Those little silly things that can really hurt you if you are on the wrong side of it. How are you categorizing your employees? Are you actually paying them equity comp in a way that is compliant? Those little sorts of things that you can help with on the front end. Are you having a compliant raise? I'll tell you, that sounds easy and intuitive, and it's not. And I saw what happens when someone does a raise on their own, and they issued shares of different series and classes. They issued some warrants, and they didn't even really know that. They issued a personal guarantee somehow. I mean, you
Yeah.
can really
Yeah.
get sideways on this if you don't have legal counsel. So I think early stage you can benefit from legal counsel. What ramps it up though, part-time to full-time, or building out your legal department? I think it's going to be needs driven and
Hmm.
risk driven, and it's also going to be budget driven, because at the end of the day, you can only do what you can afford.
Yeah. How do you define success as a general counsel beyond protecting the company, especially when you're advising several teams at once?
Success for me is a great relationship
Yeah.
where legal is valued. They understand what I'm doing there, why I'm there, and they think it's a good idea. And whether it's me or somebody else, doesn't have to be me. But if I'm still having to explain why following a law is a good idea, then we're just really having the wrong conversation. I want them to really buy into it and see the value that legal adds. And then going on from there is establishing those wonderful relationships that build confidence and trust and true teamwork. Usually one of my strongest relationships is with the CFO because we're really trying to do just the same thing in different areas.
Yeah.
And there's just so much teamwork that can happen, so much synergy that can happen, and it can really build into a wonderful company. And then a boardroom who wants to hear what legal says. I really appreciate being in board meetings. I serve as secretary of the company. So I'm there taking the minutes anyway. I don't have to contribute. I don't always have a speaking role. But if they turn to me and say, what is legal's take, or what are we doing for this and on legal? I love that they want to know what legal says and how the company is measuring up. And if legal makes a presentation on a routine basis, I think it's wonderful. It shows that the board is thinking about the right things, at least in that direction, that they're taking that part seriously.
So what are some leadership lessons you've learned through supporting such a range of business models?
Well, so I'm more of a thought leader and an individual contributor. In all of these, I'm still the sole legal department. So leadership is managing up, it's managing across, and not so much managing down, managing out maybe.
Yeah.
And so leadership style has to be really tailored to the situation. I think that leading through education and through logic and reasoning and through ensuring that people understand the some of the bases for their decisions and the pillars on which they rest, and making sure that those are sound. I think being able to put that succinctly and in a timely way that I can impact their decision making is something that I continue to hone.
So lastly, what advice would you give to a junior attorney who hopes to become a GC at a tech company one day?
I would tell them something that someone told me early on in my career is find something that you're passionate about and you're good at, and just get really, really good at it.
Yeah.
And then persevere. So and learn a whole bunch of other stuff too, because as a sole GC, I gotta know a bunch of things. So you never stop learning, keep learning. But if you can be really, really good and really knowledgeable about one thing that people need, so it's got to be relevant here in tech, is relevant to tech. For me, it started in securities laws. And because every startup needs money and they need to raise money. And so if you know securities laws really well, you can be valuable to tech companies. And that trickles down into a lot of other kinds of decision making, into marketing and disclosures and your policies and all that. And also how you pay people if you want to pay them equity compensation. But then perseverance and knowing that if you persevere, you'll get there. It might not be in the timing that you want, but you can make it work, and don't give up.
Well, that's fantastic. Thank you so much for being here. It was a pleasure speaking with you and hearing your insights, and wish you all the best.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.